Hi, I'm Michael Woods, founder of Relational Crisis Prevention, and here's something that I'll bet you didn't know. Nobody is providing crisis prevention training for parents of children with special needs, for those of you who take care of a dependent parent with dementia or Alzheimer's. And if you don't believe me, go to any of the big name crisis intervention sites and look for parent training or caregiver training. You know what? You're probably not going to find it. And I'm going to change that. Why? Because I'm a caregiver just like you, and I know firsthand what it's like to feel overwhelmed by a care receiver's challenging behaviors that just seem to happen again and again and again. And wouldn't you like to know how to prevent crisis behaviors or to safely de-escalate them once they started? Well, I've educated hundreds of parents, teachers, and direct care professionals on a best abilities approach to managing challenging behaviors while maintaining strong and healthy relationships with those in their care. And I'm going to share that knowledge with you. Relational crisis prevention is grounded in the belief that all people, even those with challenging behaviors, have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. And I believe that every individual should be seen as a person first. And therefore, I'm committed to strengthening relationships with those in your care while providing you effective strategies for preventing challenging behaviors. 2 years ago, I made a trip to Boston. Upon arriving at Logan International Airport, I grabbed my bags, rented a car, and quickly drove off to the Hyatt Regency, which was only 5 miles away and just off of Interstate 93. No problems, right? I'm an excellent driver who has a great sense of direction. Nonetheless, I had only driven about a mile from the airport when I connected to a major freeway with chaotic traffic conditions and confusing interchanges. The drive quickly became disorienting and a dizzying experience, and after several wrong turns, I realized I was lost. I had become off track. My mistake was that before departing from the airport, when the car agent asked, "Do you need a road map?" I responded with an enthusiastic, "No, I don't." Well, let's just say I didn't reach my destination. Without having a road map, I wasn't able to make a plan to get back on track towards my desired destination. You know, there are 3 main benefits to having a road map for crisis prevention. And they are: 1, a road map for crisis prevention helps you to know where you are in the crisis escalation cycle. 2, it helps you to know where you want to go. And 3, a road map helps you to know when you're going the wrong way. Let's talk about the Relational Crisis Prevention Roadmap. We're going to take a quick look, and I'll provide you a more in-depth look at each stop along the crisis prevention journey in future online training videos. But for now, let's take a look at the predictable route that your care receiver takes when his or her behaviors become off track. The first stop along the crisis escalation route is the tension phase. The tension phase is the phase in which something happens that starts to make your care receiver feel stressful or tense. The trigger can be internal, such as a thought, or the trigger could be external, such as someone taking a favorite item away from your care receiver or preventing him or her from engaging in a preferred activity. Possible triggers in the tension phase are very individualized for your care receiver. If the problem in the tension phase does not get resolved, your care receiver's behaviors will continue to become more off track and escalate to the next stop on the crisis escalation route, which is the refusal phase. The refusal phase is the phase in which your care receiver is now going to start challenging those around him or her by refusing, either verbally or physically, to do anything unless their perceived problem is resolved. This phase along the crisis escalation route is the one in which your care receiver is becoming less rational and less able to problem solve. If the problem in the refusal phase doesn't get resolved, your care receiver's behaviors will continue to become more off track and escalate to the next stop along the crisis escalation route, which is the aggression phase. The aggression phase is the phase in which your care receiver becomes physically aggressive. And we're going to talk more about that in depth as time goes on. At some point along the crisis escalation route, either because you've successfully de-escalated the crisis, I'm going to help show you how to do that, or your care receiver has exhausted all of his mental, emotional, and physical energy, your care receiver will journey to the next stop along the crisis escalation route, which is the calm down phase. And the calm down phase is the phase in which your care receiver will start to calm down. There will be very noticeable decreases in verbal and physical energy by your care receiver, and as a result, he or she will start to become more calm and start to become more rational again. The crisis escalation route is a basic paradigm that explains why normal, healthy, reasonable caregivers can behave in ways that are significantly different from their personalities. For many years, the literature and the research on caregiver and care receiver interactions only focused on how the caregiver behaviors had an influence on the care receiver's behaviors. And this is important information. And while this influence is undeniable, it is also true that during stressful times, a troubled care receiver can shape or influence a caregiver's behaviors by creating dysfunctional feelings in the caregiver. This process is called social reciprocity. If caregivers are not trained in understanding the dynamics of social reciprocity, they will end up mirroring the care receiver's behaviors and escalate the crisis. Remember that during crisis escalation, your care receiver will follow a fairly predictable route when his or her behaviors become off track. In order to help your care receiver get back on track, what you do, how you respond to your care receiver's off-track behaviors is very important. Each stop along the crisis escalation route requires that you do something different than what you do at other stops along the crisis escalation route. In other words, when your care receiver gets off track, you need to have a plan or a roadmap to get them back on track. So let's look at the plan very quickly, and then I'll discuss it more in depth later on. When someone is in crisis, nothing that anyone else does is ever perceived as being neutral. Think about it. In the past, when you've been very stressed and extremely angry, nothing that anyone else did was perceived as being neutral. You either saw it as helping you to solve your problem or making the problem worse. Well, your care receiver feels and thinks the same way. And that's why when you're traveling the crisis escalation route, you have to have a plan, P-L-A-N, on how to help your care receiver get back on track and do it in a way that de-escalates their crisis. When your care receiver is in the tension phase of the crisis escalation route, you want to help him or her to problem solve. This is the phase at which your care receiver is just beginning to feel some tension or stress about something. This is the point at which your care receiver is the most rational. And that's why helping him or her problem solve is, according to the research in crisis prevention, the best response that you can provide. Now, problem solving can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different caregivers and care receivers. And I'm not here to tell you specifically what to do, but I'm going to give you some very useful ideas in future training videos. When your care receiver is in the refusal phase, you can no longer support him or her by problem solving. Why not? Because your care receiver is quickly becoming less rational during this phase. That's why they are beginning to challenge your authority, perhaps becoming more belligerent. And this is the reason why you need to provide a different response that I will call limit setting. This phase requires that you begin to establish limited options or choices for your care receiver because of his or her inability to problem solve. When your care receiver is in the aggression phase, he or she is acting out physically, either through self-injurious behaviors, aggressive behaviors, or property destruction. During this phase, you need to carefully determine your alternatives. What are your options when your care receiver is in this phase of the crisis escalation route? Should you guide them to a safe spot? Use safety padding to protect yourself? Is the restraint an option? And I'm going to talk more in depth about how to establish a crisis plan for this phase. When your care receiver is in the calm down phase, he is starting to de-escalate. He's regaining his composure, starting to become more rational, and no longer engaging in any aggressive behaviors. Again, best practice indicates that your response during this phase is to do something different, which is to negotiate. And negotiate means to confer with another in order to reach an agreement. This response, like the responses in the other phases of the roadmap, is unique to this particular phase, and we'll talk more about it later. The entire philosophy of the Relational Crisis Prevention Roadmap is based on the belief that the relationship between the caregiver and care receiver is a priority. And we'll talk more in depth about some strategies for this as we go on. So what are positive support strategies? Positive support strategies are a set of research-based strategies used to increase the quality of life and decrease problem behaviors. In the past, intervention strategies were designed to decrease problem behaviors without considering how these interventions might affect the care receiver's quality of life. A single intervention, implemented to reduce problem behavior, often resulted in a narrowly focused behavior support plan. The effectiveness of today's behavior support plans are judged by different standards. Positive support strategies are effective interventions that result in increases in an individual's success and personal satisfaction, and the enhancement of positive social interactions across a variety of settings. I'll be creating more online training videos, just like this one, to show you how each of the positive support strategies that I've listed here, and there's more than just this, but how they work and in what phase of the Relational Crisis Prevention Roadmap that they are most useful. Last but not least, how am I going to deliver all of this information to you? I'm going to do it in a variety of ways because as a crisis prevention instructor, I've learned that people have a variety of learning modalities. For that reason, I'm going to share research-based, best practice concepts and strategies through online training videos, podcasts, question and answers, articles, caregiver success stories, polls, and interviews. And why am I going to do all this? Because I'm a caregiver just like you. And I remember a time in my life where I felt very overwhelmed, frustrated, sometimes angry, and usually at a loss as to how to respond to my boys' challenging behaviors. I have been there, done that, and the t-shirt is still hanging in my closet. The relational crisis prevention model is much like a needed roadmap. Without a roadmap, you can end up driving around, making wrong turns, and feeling totally frustrated that you are not getting any closer to your desired destination. I want to help you change that, and I think you'll agree that the information I've shared with you thus far is going to be very useful for you. Right now, I'm inviting you to click on the subscribe button on my homepage so that you can be easily notified when something new is posted. You'll be glad that you did, and I will too. And I look forward to hearing from you soon.